Hello. Okay, good morning. Thursday morning, we're streaming live the Tai Chi Paradigm 108 movement form. And going forward, we're in Massachusetts, so we're not actually going to be doing real brick and mortar classes to probably the end of June. So this is going to continue on. Continue to subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you're using YouTube. In fact, if you use YouTube, that would be good for our numbers. So that would be a thing to do. And if you're just tuning in now, we do this live Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning. You can tune in. The content is always changing. If you get to the 108 movement form, today I'll be working on palm strikes face and some of the ideas there. So it's good to tune in and see what's changing. Okay, we're going to start off with our feet shoulder width or hands like this, and we do a series of warm-up exercises. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and stop. Okay, hands like this to the side. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and stop. Okay, next with the hands go up, we're going to lift up and release and stretch. Let the muscle relax and let go of the tension in the muscle. Go as far as you can. Don't force it. 1, 2, 3. I just pace you through these movements. We're not bouncing. We're just trying to let it go. Okay, inhale, exhale. So when you inhale, breathe through your nose, exhale through the nose, and the tongue touches the roof of the mouth. So when the hand goes up, the palms face upward. When you press down, the palms face downward. And then we're going to go up again and then reach down. 1, 2, 3. To your right, 2, 3. To your left, 2, 3. Center. Inhale. Exhale. Okay, hands on your waist. Circular movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Center. Cross. Hold your knees. Circular movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Center. Hands on your waist. Neck turning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, center, tilt to the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2. Center, rotating, 1, 2, 3. Reverse, 1, 2, 3. Center, hands up, pull in, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Okay, spread your feet, turn your shoulders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, and stop. Okay, we're going to turn in this direction. Stretch it out. 1, 2, 3. Switch. 1, 2, 3. Switch. 1, 2, 3. Switch. 1, 2, and stop. Okay, now we're going to switch the other side. Straighten the front knee. Stretch out the back of the hamstring. 1, 2, 3. Turn. 1, 2, 3. Switch. 1, 2, 3. Switch. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, center, shake it out. Okay, hands up. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. So let's kind of understand why we do some of the stretching and some of the movements that we're doing. Is really to increase range of motion and also to develop some control of the different components in our body. So the components, think of your arms and your legs as pieces. They're your appendages, and on each one of your appendages you have several joints. So what we're doing is learning to manipulate our joints and release the tension in the joints. So relaxing really means to release the tension in the joints. The tension in the joint is created by the muscles that join them. So if there's tension or excessive rigidness created by the muscle contraction, then that's going to create some of that tension. The other thing is stretching allows us to release that muscle. So especially the back of the legs, even the front of the thighs, those muscles are very big. So when they dominate the position, you're going to feel stiffness and sort of resistance to the stretch. So learning to release those muscles are what we're trying to learn to do. And at the same time, in order to move through the movements in the form, you have to learn to relax your joints. And you'll discover that you have many more joints than you've been using, simply because a lot of us are pretty isolated in movement, or we haven't moved for a long time. So that's just kind of a heads up on why we do a lot of those. Next, so in the past few sessions, I've been running through the form and going through some explanation, but this is really something that we should all work on to understand that we have a triangle position. I talk about the geometry of position. So if it's a 90-degree position at the heels, and when you pivot, you end up in the square position. So this is a transition that allows you to shift your weight from one side to the other, and we're going to do more of that later on, where you set up a supporting foot, which is really a supporting leg. So once I do this and I transfer my weight, I'm actually able to step up or shift my weight this way, pivot this foot, and straighten. So it's really a mechanism that you have to build into your understanding that we have to shift our weight in order to create a transition. Now that's really going from the 45 to the square position. The 45 is the triangle position. So when we turn like this, and we're pivoting on the ball of the foot, we face this direction. So this is called the empty stance, and we're sitting like this, and we go forward. This is a leaning stance or an archery stance, and you sit back. So the two stances that we work with a lot are these two stances, okay? So essentially what's happening is learning to transition from one leg to the other. You go forward and back. So forward and back is weighting and unweighting, and then we turn and fill those appendages. So you have the two legs you're working on. We keep the hands on the waist, or you can actually put them in the small of your back, just to be conscious that your upper body is actually tied to the lower body. Okay, then we turn from side to side. So that's a real basic exercise that you should do regularly, because this is something your body's not too comfortable with in the beginning, because the legs don't know how to release and relax so that you can settle into the stance. Okay, so that's some leg work that you can do, just the legs. Now, I've done this in the past where we turn to the side and we do a series of movements, and the form is really created by a bunch of postures. In fact, there's about 16 postures. This is called grasp the sparrow's tail, and we turn and we face the opposite direction. So you're following me in the same direction. So my right foot is forward, your right foot should be forward. My right hand is up, your right hand should be up. My thumb is up, your thumb is up on the right. And we place the palms face to face like this. That's called pressing, or this is the rounded position. We separate the hands and we bring the hands toward the navel, turn the inside hand up, and you push forward. That's grasp the sparrow's tail. It's made up of 4 movements. In the form, it happens on the right side first. So if you get the right side down, when we get to this position in the form, you'll know that it's your right side grasp the sparrow's tail, and you hook your wrist, and we turn toward the front where the mirror is. If we were to separate the hands, that's really setting up for the single whip. Now, single whip is actually in the corners with the arms. Now we're on the left side. So we're going to do the left and right side grasp the sparrow's tail, and we go in and then out. So in and out is forward and back. You hook your wrist. We're going to review that again. So left toe, left hand up, thumbs up on the left, palms together. Separate the hand so that actually the front hand leaves, connects right where the crook of the wrist is with the palms down, and you draw toward the navel. The inside hand turns up and you push forward. Okay, so those are the 4 movements. And then we turn back to the mirror and the feet become square. We can bring this hand out. So both hands are pretty parallel in the leg position, but in the form we're really here, okay? And the legs actually like this, wider. So this would be your horse stance. This is actually your shoulder width stance, okay? So we just flared out like that. It's not enough. We actually have to flare out and then pivot again and then turn the heels out. That's about the width of the stance, okay? And if we bring the feet back in, we would actually back to here. Okay, so let's go to the right side again. So we're here, turn, and we switch to this side. So here's your right side grasp the sparrow's tail. 4 movements. There was 1 and 2. So you see vertical is an empty sitting stance. Horizontal is this. roll back. So for every hand movement, there is a leg movement, and that gives you this cycling and a relationship between the upper body and the lower body. Okay, so that is grasp the sparrow's tail and a piece of single whip. Okay, so we have a left hand single whip and we have a right hand single whip. So you remember, single whip is left and right side, grasp the sparrow's tail is right side. Grasp the sparrow's tail leads into one or the other. So if you're on right side, grasp the sparrow's tail, it's going to take you into the right side single whip. If you're in the left side, grasp the sparrow, it'll take you into the left side single whip. And to give you an idea, the front side will have the right side grasp the sparrow's tail. When the form works off the back side, you're going to have the left-sided movement. So that just gives you a hint. And that's really specifically to the Tai Chi Paradigm form. So that has 37 pieces linked together, but there's 16 different postures because some of these postures repeat. Okay, next. When we're here, okay, let's turn again. Let's go to that vertical position again. Okay, now this is left side vertical up, right side horizontal. Okay, and then the hands look like this. So your hands look like this, okay, or like this, right? So when my hands are like this, when we do this first exercise, so here's geometry of position. Here's your circle. Here's your palm. Okay, here's your circle. Here's your palm. Okay, so when the elbow is out, that's the direction you would turn to. So because we have two elbows up, we have an option of going to both directions. Now, if I had only one elbow up, that's the direction I'm going to turn in. All right? Is that pretty clear? Okay, so that's going to happen when I turn in this direction and I go into the vertical elbow. When this palm faces out and I have this hand horizontal, you see where my positions are on the left side? Left hand palm out. Now, when I turn, the left palm, when I flip the elbows, is the inside hand. Then the other hand, which is horizontal, drops down and you push. So that's called brush, knee, and push. Now I'm going to go to vertical again. Now I'm going to round out on the left and I press forward, just like in grasp the sparrow's tail. But I'm just going to hold that position and turn all the way around 180 degrees. And I'm going to turn toward the elbow side, and I'm going to flip the hands. The inside hand goes down, and you push. So that's brush knee. Okay, left side push. And then I go back to center, and we set up. So all we're doing is setting up the hands, going through center, and then turning all the way to the other side. And we flip the hands, brush down, and push. So if you can remember or at least follow this format, it's really a sequence of events. So sequencing through this movement, you can see this is brush, knee, right, and left push. We go back to center, then we go forward, and then we go back. We turn back to the starting position, and that simply is this. You see, if I separate the hands, you can see both hands have a different position. When you bring them together face to face, the face of the palms facing each other with the middle finger and the thumb lining up, you end up turning to this direction. Now we turn, flip the elbows, bring the inside hand down, and you push. Now let's reset. Horizontal press, sit back, turn back to the front. Now we're going to turn again. So we're working the legs and we're working the arms. So that's brush knee. We reset and forward. Okay, so what's resetting? Well, when you're in a stance, the empty stance or the sitting stance, sitting in the back leg, the front leg is toe up. So that's a characteristic of this stance. When we go like this, the front hand and that front leg, the rounded side and the forward leg, okay, that's what we're resetting to. So whenever you start, a position or a posture, there's different starting positions. So that's one of them. This is left side, and this is right side neutral position or strum the lute position. And then when you go to this, that would be the forward position with the horizontal elbow, and that'll give you an idea that the vertical and horizontal are, setups. When we hold the ball, which is this, that's a setup, depending on what posture you're leading into. A lot of times, or most of the time, the hold the ball position is setting up for either diagonal flying or part the horse's mane, which almost look identical. So hold the ball becomes this. It's done in the silk reeling exercise, and hold the ball is just imagine, if I make a circle, that's really a sphere. But we don't see the volume of that ball because we're not actually transitioning in the total space. So later on in the 108 movement form, I'm going to go over palm strikes face and some of the methods in which the ball is reversed and how it's kind of filled in volume. But basically, hold the ball is this. And it's really like you're holding a steering wheel, maybe a big wheel like this, and you're really turning in right or left. That's all you're doing. Okay. Now there is a method from single whip where we go in and lower the hands and across and level. So that is actually how we hold the ball from the single whip position, and that's one way. And sometimes we're in single whip position where we don't hold the ball. We might just transition like in fist under elbow. So, but holding the ball from single whip is generally a pretty standard transition because diagonal flying generally follows single whip to hold the ball. Okay, then from here, let's loosen up the shoulders. So that was a couple of drills that you can practice. Just review the video and you can actually practice those two postures. So this is just loosening up the shoulders and then going backwards. So this is just controlling movement directionally. So what we're moving is our shoulders, and they can go either way, backwards or forward. Now this is swinging the arms. You press and release. Exhale, inhale. So you're really building range of motion, and then at the same time while your arms are swinging, you're controlling the direction. Okay? Inhale, exhale, right? Exhale, inhale. Exhale on the back stroke, inhale on the front, forward movement, and back. Breathe through your nose, both inhalation, exhalation. Tongue touches the roof of your mouth. And center. So hands up, pull in. This is inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. So the term, breath and movement, and the idea of breath and movement, you hear the term sometimes qigong or some type of meditative exercise. Well, qigong is just a general term for the idea of breath and movement. So breath and movement in Tai Chi is sequential, and there's actually some conscious intent in what the movements are doing. So breath and movement is part of what Qigong is, and Tai Chi is a form of Qigong, but it's more of a intent type of movement and breath. So your body does move, your breath does move, and there is a coordination. Certain types of Qigong, which is much simpler, is more of a standing type where you just hold the position. So there's breath and there's movement because you have to breathe in order to stay alive. Actually, without breath, you can't support the oxygen that the body needs. And then as far as movement, there isn't a lot of movement sometimes in standing positions or standing meditation. That's really more of a visual cultivation or just using your mind to track your body as a meditative action. And then when we're doing something like Tai Chi where it's involving coordination, synchronization, it's much more complex, but the complexity of those movements is actually much more beneficial if you're trying to improve balance, trying to improve mobility, trying to improve coordination. Movement is essential because without movement, you really can't build that idea. And because the movements in Tai Chi are very specific, accuracy of movement, roundness of movement, gentleness of movement, all of those things have to come together to create the visual look of the movement. So people that watch Tai Chi, they can recognize Tai Chi because of that type of execution. Just like if you watch a ballerina or someone doing ballet, you can recognize that it's ballet. You see someone doing a specific action, you can visually imagine what that is if you know or heard of what it is. Someone that's bowling, someone's swinging a golf club, those are specific actions tied to that sport and activity. So when you're doing Tai Chi, there is a specific look to that. And what is the look and the characteristic is the shifting of the weight, the control of the body, the integration of body, and the spatialness that you go through when you go through the movements. All of that is tied to proprioception and your sensory system and every other system that's involved in creating these movements. So that's from breath to movement, from the visuals, from the mind-body relationship. All of these things are concepts. And then you bring in the principles of shifting your weight, finding your center of mass. All of these things over time will be something that you become much more astute about, and your body becomes much more intelligent. So we just did the swinging movements. So next we're going to do this. It's a circular motion, and Tai Chi is really made up of circles. Not complete circles all the time, but circularity. It has arcs and rotations. So this is something that's very unique, and because when we move our limbs, it's the only way we can actually move them. Many people that might be watching this, they hear a lot of terms. Tai Chi has a lot of poetic phrases, and they use a lot of metaphors. As they say, hey, in Tai Chi, seek the straightness from the round. What does that mean? You have to interpret it. But really, straightness in Tai Chi is really an illusion. We really can't do anything absolutely straight. It really is created as a manipulation of our skeletal structure to create what appears to be linear. Okay. An example of that is I'm here and I draw a line and it looks pretty flat and horizontal. So it's a straight line from here to here. But is it really straight if I'm turning my body? It's really not straight. It's approaching straightness because the line from here to here is really an arc because my spine is the center of that curve. But you don't see the curvature if you're only seeing it in 2 dimensions. If you see it in 3 dimensions, you would realize that when I turn like this, that it's really wrapping around my body. So this is where the straightness of the movement appears to be really an illusion of the idea. But we use the idea of straightness as we draw across for accuracy of movement. Okay. Now, we're going to bring our hands down like this, make a circular movement. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now here, conflict and movement is the tension in your shoulder. So if you have a little trouble getting your hand all the way up, it's because you haven't let go. But don't force the movement. Just let it go up as gently as possible, not too fast and not so slow that you actually allow the muscle in the shoulder to tense. And when you let it go on the downstroke, let it release. Free fall in a sense that it's free falling, but don't free fall in a sense that you're creating a downward force. And this increases range of motion, builds coordination, and while we're focusing on, how big that circle is in the hands, you don't really look at the rest of the body because you're so focused on the hands. But when you do this, your body's actually sensing and detecting the change in the center of mass and the forces acting on your body. So when I go up and I go down, you can actually feel the weight transitioning from side to side because it's a compensation that your body actually knows to do. So that's part of proprioception, and it's part of heightening your awareness and heightening your sensory system to let it know where it's going. So if you do Tai Chi and all you think is it's a physical exercise like everything else you do as an exercise, then you're missing the whole strategy of what we're doing. We're building sensitivity to movement and feeling of movement in space, and the accuracy of those movements is actually something that progresses and is dialed in over time based on how our limbs and our joints should be manipulated. And that manipulation is really learning to move our body without conflict and movement. And conflict and movement is tension. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next, we're going to shift our weight from side to side. Okay, when we shift our weight, we end up here. When we shift our weight, we end up here. So one of the things I've been talking about is how do you find the center of mass? Because a lot of people that pick up Tai Chi is trying to improve their balance. So many people come to me and say, my balance is horrible. I don't know why I can't really stand on my leg when I used to be able to stand on one leg. Well, a lot of it is, a little bit of fear and anxiety because I can't hold a position anymore. Well, that fear becomes tension. That tension becomes upper body tension. So if this area is very uptight, then you shift and you're going to be unstable. And the other thing is you're nervous. I'm trying to find my balance and I can't find it. Well, you have to practice it. So when we shift our weight, at some point, this leg will drop across because that's where it hangs naturally. Now, if I go like this and I hold it like this, there's tension here, and that's going to want me to do this. So if I go like this and I bring it across, it's like there's a magnet that pulls the legs together. That's just a metaphor. Or an idea. There's not really a magnet. It's just gravity pulling that leg down because this leg has weight. And if you relax the hip joint, it's going to come in. So that's what relaxing the joint means, that it's going to come to the natural position without resistance to a force. And what's the force? The force is really, or the strength is this, pulling it out. But if you let it go, it's going to come here. So when it hits this point, that's your center of gravity. Okay? And then you can do this. And then you can do this. And it comes back down. You can do this, this, and this. So really, that's really controlling your lower half of your body. Okay, so that's something else that you can practice to find where your center is. Now, where your center is when we're the position we can swing our arms, right? So I've been doing this, 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 so you can see that the relationship between forward and backward is really this. So that becomes coordination. Now, why is this a little bit difficult in the beginning? But for you know, depends on how active you are. It's a little different and difficult because we're moving. But if you're moving excessively, then your body's going to be all over the place. So you have to just let it swing like we were swinging around like this. The natural swing is like this. And that natural swing and that relationship should be the way you're walking. Okay, so when we walk like this, and then I pick this foot up and kick it in, you should have that same relationship, stepping forward and then reversing and going forward and back. So if you practice this a few times a day, you'll actually pick up on that coordination and what it feels like to stand on one leg and move without sort of jostling the body too much. Okay? So that's one exercise. Then we're going to go side to side like this. So this is another one, counterbalancing the forces that are acting on your body. So controlling your center of mass. Okay, so then we'll go to the other side and we swing. Okay, alternate. So it's kicking and pulling. But that's just an idea. You're really just letting it go. So we've heard that saying, what goes up must come down. Well, if this goes up, it's got to come down. When it comes down and it goes up, then it must come down. So the hands do the same thing. When it goes up, it's got to come down. It goes up, it's got to come down and back and forth. So because when something goes up, like a balloon, it floats a certain way. If it continues to float, how far does it go before it starts to come down? That would be depending on, the type of gas that's in that balloon. But when we move our arms, it has weight, and when it reaches a certain point, when you release the tension, it's going to go down. So when we move our arms up and down, what we're doing is channeling the joint and the skeleton in a direction by controlling and relaxing the musculature. So how is that done? That's done up here. So learning the movement and mimicking it is the first line of learning. And then you have to bring in the concept. Bring in the concept of releasing tension, deleting excessiveness, and controlling, how much strength is actually used. So in Tai Chi, a lot of times you would hear the term, don't use any strength. Or Tai Chi doesn't use strength, it uses the mindfulness, the will, the mind-body connection. But really, what it really means is how much strength. So how much strength really isn't something that we understand right away or ever understand, because it's the correct amount of strength to do the task, and that's really the idea behind it. So how much does it take to lift the arm? It's just enough to get it to feel like it's floating up. How much does it take to let it go? Actually, if you just let it go, it's going to free fall. But we don't want it to free fall because then it becomes flaccid. It becomes disconnected from the mind. We're letting it go based on how we release that tension. And at the same time, where do you release, what do you release, and how do you release? Those are the answers your body will have to figure out, or you have to direct it so that it figures it out over time. And then the movements become relaxed. Okay, let's stand like this, deep breathing. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Okay, now we're here. Okay, silk reeling. Forward and back. So here's to hold the ball. Here's the diagonal flying or part the horse's mane. And we're going to turn. So this has more dimension than a typical diagonal flying or part the horse's mane. Last, I think 2 classes ago, I went over what the difference is. So it's really not significant in appearance, only in functionality it might make a bit of difference. But so it's nothing to really fuss over. It's really something to just house as a bit of information. So when we go forward and back, really we're dealing with a space. Here's the frontal position, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So those are the two positions that we have. There's one forward and here's one backward. And the hands only can do this. And if I do this, that's actually going to hold the ball. If I lean forward, that's part of the horse's mane. Right? If I go like this, and I slant up like this, the defining of the movement is a little bit more linear and appears to be splitting. So that's more like what diagonal flying would be like. But the final position almost appears to be the same. So slightly different in the type of transition. Now if I go to this position and I turn to hold the ball, I built some volume in the motion, and now I'm covering more space, covering more planes of movement. And actually, that's what happens when we're moving in space, because spatial awareness and these movements create volume. And volume is three-dimensional. So when we think of moving, we need to move with volume. That creates dimensional change. If you don't have volume, it becomes two-dimension. And what's two-dimension? Two-dimensional movement is flat. Most of us look at things in two dimensions, so that's why our body simulates movements that are pretty flat. So we're here, then we're here, and then we're here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the sequence of events. I call them sequence and events because when you move the hand to here, that's an event. It's something that happens in space and happens in time. So it becomes an event. Now because it's an event, you have 5 different events happening. But at the same time, they're working together to build a relationship. So this relationship becomes what integration of body is, and that synchronization becomes sort of a harmony in the body. So if you think of music, it's sort of orchestrating your body so the components of the body are working together so it seems to be seamless and organized. So that's one of the big things. You know, if you organize your thought, if you organize your body, then you become much more productive and much more efficient in anything that you do. So learning, you know, through the physical side of movement really is a pretty amazing way to build brain plasticity, interest in movement, and also building great circulation, because without movement, nothing happens. You need to move in order to create circulation. You know, you can be on a machine or use a mechanism to create circulation, but it doesn't work. So you have your own apparatus. Why not utilize it to make yourself as efficient as possible? Create that circulation through muscular contractions and movement. Create the circulation to feed oxygen and nutrients to the cells. So that's really why we should do Tai Chi, to build that and then build the mindfulness of the movement through sort of visual assimilation. Okay, next, when we're in this position, we're going to hold the 3 positions like this, that in the bent knee position, there's a lower hoop. So this is standing meditation. Clear your thoughts, hold the position. Okay, that's the lower hoop. Shoulder level hoop, that's 2. tongue touching the roof of your mouth. Breathe through your nose. And then elbows down. And then we lower the hands. Now the next two positions, the legs straighten. So there's 3 in the bent position, 2 in the elongated stretch position. If you consider it stretching, just reaching, and so you're lifting sort of anti-gravity. You're letting your body go up, and it's not completely weightless, but the thing is you feel like you're lighter, and you're lifting. The spine is lifting up, the chin is down, taking tension out of the nape of the neck, elongating the elbows and the knees without creating a locked knee position or locked elbow position. That kind of is what hyperextension is. We don't want to hyperextend the joint. And then extend the fingertips and lift the neck. So it's like creating a bit of directional force. That's what energy in a movement is, creating a directional force. Okay, deep breathing. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. So, when we're doing Tai Chi, the goal is actually to use the correct amount of strength. That's something that's a concept. That varies based on your level of understanding and the level of competence. But the thing is, it can never be a zero strength because your body has to have something to hold it together. There's tonus in the body. The musculature is always working, 24/7. Otherwise, it'd fall apart. So your system actually knows to keep the body intact. If you move, you actually have to regulate, and that's what the mind intent is. So when you regulate that movement is really the control factor. Controlling these movements over time makes the body much more intelligent because it starts to recognize excessiveness, erroneous motion, erroneous muscular tension. All of this starts to become much more refined, and your body becomes much more aware and sensitive. So sensitivity to feeling, touch, feeling of your own movements, what it feels like when you're standing. Is it balance? Is it off balance? Is my foot misaligned? Do I feel like I'm out of position where I have to adjust that foot? So those are things that's a heightened awareness of body form and position. So, okay, now from here we're going to do this movement. This is called preparation. It's a starting movement. So as we move through these different positions, your body will start to recognize it over time. So this is vertical position. Here we fold the elbows and sink the knees and then lift up. Okay, and then we go up, and then we go down, we go up, and we go down. And the body responds because there's always a give and take. The body responds based on what it's experiencing and what it feels like. And when we find positions, we think of, I like to use the vertical and the horizontal as a concept, because between vertical and vertical is the exchange of directional change. without vertical and horizontal, without movements that pass through the slanted positions, you wouldn't have any movement. It would just be flat, and you wouldn't be able to go. So that's transitioning. That's something that becomes refined based on how do we move from here to here to here to here is really based on that. Okay, so when we go like this, there's a vertical, then it becomes horizontal. And then you have a side-to-side movement. So if I go like this, so when I go like this, like we were doing it earlier, when I go like this, what is happening? This foot comes to here because I'm shifting my weight over to here, and this leg naturally wants to gravitate toward this leg. So that's something that happens when gravity is being used in support. So that's an external universal force, right? So when we're here, everything comes to center, and then we just shift it back, and everything is here. And then this thing on this side, this leg, is actually free. Now you put a little effort to bring the foot out, and then the same thing happens. So that's how we step side to side. And then we go back and shift. So it's very subtle. Now the idea of shifting and then moving the foot doesn't mean that actually creates an excessiveness. So if I go like this and I pick up my foot like this, it's not necessary to step like that. So that's erroneous movement, adding something that shouldn't be there, and it becomes excessive. But do you sink and bend your knees? Bending your knees and then doing that, and then maintaining a level of consistency in how far the foot is off the ground really is very small. You don't have to pick the foot up a lot in order to shift. So that's something that will be picked up over time, because a lot of times when you think of stepping, well, I must have to pick this foot up. How much should I pick it up? You don't have to pick it up much at all. You just have to sort of glance across the floor as lightly as possible, because the more you go up, the more you have to come down. So that's kind of disruptive in a sense if the movement doesn't need that type of action. Okay, next, we're going to do the carry tiger to the mountain. So this is this movement. So we're just going to run through these quickly. Okay, and because I've gone through these exercises a lot, I've explained what they are. This is lower hoop, shoulder height hoop, upper hoop, open, cross hand positions, and lower. So this is a transition in the form. It's also defining the size and shape of these circles and arcs. Infinity sign is divert and block, and it goes out to the side, goes in, it goes out, it goes in, and it goes out. Okay, and then forming the fist, I grouped some of these together in the last class to show you how they work inside the form. So really we're learning the transition and how to manipulate the skeletal structure. So the palm is in, you roll the fingers in, and I've just sped up everything because time is of the essence, so we're kind of reaching the point before we do the form. So, in the past I've done this linear form, so I want to go through that before, a lot of people forget that we have this concept of doing the forms by individual postures. So the first thing you do is get into the left stance or the left foot forward stance, and we go to neutral. We go to horizontal elbow and press. So all the stuff that we talked about earlier is learning to step and shift the weight and make a transition from side to side. Here's your grasp the sparrow's tail right side. Okay, I'm not doing a lot of twisting and turning because you're learning sequence, so you want to identify the posture. That was grasp the sparrow's tail. This is single whip. Okay, get that image. We try not to make it as physical as some people like try to be. So it's just this. Okay, we hold the ball. That's the transition. Okay, The next posture is diagonal flying. Okay? So any one of those movements, this, step up to this, and this, can be practiced as one unit. Meaning, if you're here, you go here, and then back and forth. So you can just do that. Now, once we transition, okay, after we toe out and step to the other side, this can be practiced as one unit till you kind of understand that that's what you're doing once you're on this right-legged side. Now, grasp the sparrow's tail we did as a drill earlier, where you have the right and left side with the 180-degree turn. This is grasp the sparrow's tail. So you go back to that drill to work that movement. Then if we go to this corner, starting like this, and we hold that position, we had this position earlier in the form where we went like this as part of that drill. Well, single whip requires you to be in this hand position, and you open the stance and then draw this hand across. Remember where's the straightness from the round comes? Okay, here's hold the ball. Okay, that's single whip. So you would start here, draw across, hold the ball as one set of movements. So we're here, single whip, we drew across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you reset, draw across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's single whip, hold the ball. Okay. Now, if we're in a position like this, say hold the ball, and we end up like this is diagonal flying. Now let's sit back, hold the ball, diagonal flying. Hold the ball, diagonal flying. That's already created in the silk reeling exercises. So your silk reeling exercise supports diagonal flying or part the horse's mane, and a transition between the front and the back leg. So you can understand all the things that we've done up to this point supports everything that we're doing throughout the form. So there's no exercise that we do that's just doing it for the sake of doing it. There's a purpose, there's a method to the approach. It's kind of a method to the madness, and when you pick up on the idea of what you're learning, then you'll begin to understand a lot more. So let's go back to this right-legged position. We know when we're in this position that we can press. And then we know we can shift our weight. But when we do this in the form, we actually press, and we go to the shoulder width stance and find this position. Then we lift this hand and bring it slightly to the side, because we're going to bend from here and pick up the other hand and end up here. So that's stork flaps wings, okay? Stork flaps wings with the step up is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay? So see this position, we've been there before with carry tiger to the mountain, okay? So that's why if you start to identify some of the framework and the movements, then when we go through the form and you get to these specific positions, you kind of already have been there. But you haven't connected it all because you can't make the correlation, because you're learning when you learn something, you're learning everything as one unit. So you get a bunch of units up here, but you haven't really cross-referenced them yet. But once you start to begin to identify those positions, vertical to horizontal, palms together, and the stances, all of those things start to be the first part of the learning curve. Then you start to understand that when you start to build the posture and then build the form and then build, and it goes on forever as how to build your coordination, build your awareness, your sensitivity, build the feeling of those movements, build the idea of how much strength the body really needs to create this. Now, it's completely different from some other forms of exercise where you try to trick the body to not, because the body has this ability to adapt. And if you're trying to build strength, you want to keep the muscle in a sense that it's building and strengthening, whether it's through nutrients and exercise and using specific approaches like maybe using more weight or heavy weights or repetition. That's what body conditioning training is. In Tai Chi and in movement like this, you're trying to allow the body to understand, and through this adaptation, to not to use anything beyond what it should be using. That's the type of thing that happens as a natural course of doing something efficiently. The more you know it, the better you do it. The longer you do it, the less effort it takes. So to do Tai Chi, it should be effortless. It should be refining the movement through this idea of perfecting movement, so it's like doing nothing. So that's really why we don't sweat, why we don't hyperventilate when we're doing these exercises, because we're approaching a level of naturalness. You know, if you're not doing a lot of physical exercise and you're just relaxing and doing something that's very casual, you're not breathing hard and you're not hyperventilating, you're not stressing, and you're not sweating. That's the natural course of, how we should be doing things. And then your body will be always doing things in sort of this state of being, rather than forcing it and then having to recover all the time. So that's kind of why Tai Chi can be done effortlessly. Okay, we're going to run through the sequence as quickly as possible. It's going to go into the 108 movement anyway, so we're going to go through the form. Preparation, left side forward, and then we go forward. Sit back and turn. Step up, grasp the sparrow's tail right side, leading to single whip. So see, all of these are strung together. Eventually, it's mapped out on the floor, and we will build this as a course of learning and identifying. Raise the hand, bend from the waist. We just got through this with that frontal position. Now we're moving on to the next section of the form, which is really brush knee 4 times. So this is form the fist divergent block. That's your infinity sign. Here's your cross arm position, and here's your leopard and tiger springs to mountain. And then we're going to go back to neutral. Remember, neutral, vertical, elbow, and horizontal are important starting positions. Now, this is really just vertical elbow. That was fist under elbow. There's your horizontal and your vertical hand. This is repulse the monkey. It's called retreat and repulse the monkey, and that means go backwards, moving away. And then we're going to do it again for the 3rd time on the left. Now we go to the right side, which is a position that doesn't happen a lot. At least it's not the beginning or the dominant side very often. So here's diagonal flying again. Now here's your left again. Insert the needle. Step up to fan through the back. Okay, next we turn, parry and punch. Here's your horizontal high position to the vertical position. Invert the hand, it goes horizontal and it goes back to vertical. So you can see the exchange between vertical and horizontal. leopard and tiger springs well. So this was the second time we did that series, forming the fist and leopard and tiger springs to mountain. Here we do the carry tiger to the mountain. Now we're facing the back side, and here the movements become left-sided. Here's the left side, raise the hand, bend from the waist, pick the right hand up. This is stork flaps wings on this side. Looks the same once you get to the final position. We're here. Left side grasp the sparrow's tail. Remember I told you that the left side movements will happen on the back side? Well, here's where these movements are. Single whip, left side. Palm goes in, flip the hands over because the diagonal flying is still on the left here. We go back to the left here, stroke down, part the horse's mane left. Okay, now we step up, and here's part the horse's mane on the right side. Now we go to the corner, take the top hand, point to that corner, and we end up here. Jade lady work shuttle, left side. Cross over, jade lady work shuttle, right side. And drop your elbow, turn back to the front. We're in the single whip position. Now we swing down with this hand, and we're going to create the circle, drop this hand, and pivot. This is cloud hands. Now, we didn't do the footwork or the cloud hand movements in the drills. I've done that quite a few times in the other classes. I'm doing this an extra time just to get us over to this position. Hook your wrists, single whip, hold the ball. Flip it over, and diagonal flying. Hands out, step back, bring the hands forward, and close. Okay, good. Feet shoulder width, deep breathing, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Okay, so that completes the Tai Chi Paradigm form. Hope you got enough out of the the dialogue and also the explanation of a lot of the things as concepts. And hopefully you can review this video, even for the dialogue or any information that you thought you might have heard and missed something. So, on that note, we're going to move on to the 108 movement form, and you're welcome to follow that if you choose to, and gain any insights that we might talk about in the longer form. Okay, so over the past few months, actually it's been a long time. It's been almost 70 days, or 72 days maybe. That's a lot of time to be streaming, and so there's a lot of content on there. So, whatever I go over in these classes, some of it's redundant, some of it is new, but when you follow these classes, it's because they're live. It's always fluid. So whatever information you get, just house it in here, and then at some point it might surface as a concept that you've already experienced or learned. So let's start with the cloud hands, and I'm going to move right into palm strikes, face, and a couple of those moves because we've done a lot of stuff on the kicks. So single whip, hold the ball. We shift, pivot, turn. Shift, touch, heel, to pivot. Right? So that's going toward the left. Now, when we're here, we hold the ball, we shift, pivot. Leaving that foot there, we shift and pivot. Okay, so that's a transition that takes us. So that's the little jog that sometimes you see in the form, allowing the upper body and lower body to tie into that. So with that pivot is shift, settle, turn, and lift. Okay? So, when we're dealing with direction, center of mass, vertical and up, vertical and horizontal. Movements have to actually eventually blend. It's just like when I push out like this and brush knee, your hand is actually going from here to here to here. So there's a turning effect. It's a spiraling, right? When I turn my body, like here, there's a right to left movement. So what's created is by the different parts of the skeletal structure and different groups of muscle that allow you to rotate. But it still isn't a dimensional change in the movement other than a plane of motion. So if you want dimensional change, a multi-dimensional action, when you turn, my hand is just doing that. That's one direction. When my hand is doing this, that's one direction. When you combine this and combine this, that becomes multi-dimensional and it has much more intricate motion there. It's like banging a nail straight in with a hammer or screwing a screw into a piece of something. That way it has to go forward and rotate versus just boom, boom, boom. So if I'm in this position and I go forward like this and I turn, when I rotate like this and I touch down and I pivot, I actually build in rotational movement and downward spiraling and lifting spiraling. That creates a dimension of movement that you're probably not obvious to you. And a lot of times when you first learn, you can't interpret things and add things that you don't think that you didn't know was supposed to be there. But if we're talking about total movement in space, then if your mind is open enough and you practice, then some of these things would become discovery. And you discover these concepts because you've heard segments of principles that have to tie together, and then you have to interpret it. But because it's not always obvious to you, you have to somewhat wait for the explanation or maybe the dialogue about this. So that's what that jog is. When we're here and the body compensates and turns, it becomes this rising and turning and pivoting. And so in cloud hands, that's what you have to kind of tie into the movement. But you don't want that up and down or spiraling, twisting, and all that to be very obvious. It has to be built into the movement as something that happens, like when I sit back and I turn, this here, here, and here is actually part of that motion as well. You know, the fact that the hands turn over, the fact that your shin and the forearm are identical in its built, the way it's made up, allows you to have twisting and turning. Otherwise, you would just have a single bone there. The reason why it's like that is so that you can create these motions in space. So, you know, there must be a reason to have that motion, because there must be an advantage to doing it a certain way versus doing it another way. Otherwise, your body wouldn't be capable of doing this. Now, when we talk about our torso and our spine, where it twists and turns, you know, it must be a reason why we have all these bones and why we have so many vertebrae in our back to create a position and so forth. But if we don't use our body in the way it was designed, and that I talk a lot about that, is that then we really miss the whole point of why the body should be utilized this way. Now, if you don't utilize it that way, you're not utilizing the musculature, you're not creating the action, the ligaments, the tendons, the connective tissue, all of the stuff that ties your whole body together is not working and not doing what it's supposed to do. So what happens when you stop using certain parts of your body or using it in a certain way, it stops using it that way because it just prunes it out and says, I don't need to do that anymore. So that's why if you become inactive or you don't move or you don't do it, why does my body doesn't feel like right here? Why is my body weak in this way? Or why does my body... So it's because you're not using it. Now, refined movement and moving in a sophisticated way actually takes effort, skill, and time. So if you don't put the effort in it, you don't understand it, or you've never been exposed to it, you would never know that your body can move this way. That's why we have so many people that are so uncoordinated. As they get older, you start to lose your balance, you don't have agility, you don't have... All of that is because it went away. It's gone. It's gone because you can't use it. You can't use something that you haven't actually nurtured over time. So that's why when you start to do something like Tai Chi, it's opening, this door to some amazing things that you can do with the body. But it's not a super athletic thing necessarily. It's just utilizing your body the way it's designed to use. And in that way, your heightened understanding and the way the body's mechanism starts to work is building this brain plasticity, this program that's up in here that's driving everything. And that's actually what's really important. Going from there, we end up in the single whip position again. We end up here. So this is palm in front of the face. So it's kind of self-explanatory. But remember, postures are positions. And the postures are not just the position while you're in transition. It's the position at the end. So like brush knee and push is this. So that's your final position. Okay? In single whip, it's this. Okay? The spine should be straight. The stance is like this. The hips are there but not tense. And that's what a body form is, a body posture. So that's your final position. So in palm strikes face, your final position is palm in front of the face, regardless of which one it is. So in a transition, when we turn, we set up just like in high pat the horse or palm strikes face. You can say reversing the ball, reversing the ball. Reversing the ball, actually, I spoke about that a little bit earlier, is that a ball, in Tai Chi, a ball is really a sphere. A hoop is a cross-section of a piece of a circle, right? So it's a cross-section. A sphere is this big global thing. The biggest diameter of that sphere is across the center, sort of the equator. It goes across the center, and there's your biggest circle. Okay, so that's the circle of the big ball. Now, if you go up the ball and you come down the side of the ball, you're creating levels of hoops and circles, cross-sectional pieces, right? So that happens not only in the flat plane, but also in the vertical plane and in every plane imaginable. So you can imagine how many of these cross-sectional circles you have. Every one varying in dimension, every one varying. So that's this big globe. So if I hold my hand and I roll the ball like this, or I roll the ball like this, that's really what filling that sphere is, that volume of space. So if I'm here and I change the ball based on how the body is moving and create a movement, that's really a transition. So if there's an idea, so which way is the right way of doing the movement? Well, the right way is how you adapt to the intent of the motion, right? When you apply a technique. So if you take the movement and then you start to interpret it and say, well, now I'm applying the movement. Well, the critical part is the final position, because that's where your defensive posture is, to position. So that part of it is really important because you're dealing with your space. Now, transitionally is adaptability, depending on the condition and situation that you're trying to apply that motion to. So if I'm here, there's my position. My transition went from here to here. If my hand came down, I want to use this side, then my hand could come to the center, or it could come over the top. And it depends if I'm turning or not turning, right? Or right to left. Because movements are in space that has volume, has right, left, forward, backward, up, and down. That creates the volume in space. The angular change in the position from the torso throughout varies the degrees of those movements. So if you take a circle that has 360 degrees, and you take every cross-section in 360 degrees times 360, you know how many permutations, how many combinations of those 360 degrees you have? Quite a few. It's an infinite amount depending on how many combinations you use. But we're dealing with vertical, horizontal, 45 degrees. So you don't have to go through a trillion of these positions. You just have to define your space. So if you define your space depending on what the intent of that movement and the size of the ball and how big you go with that ball, you have to tie that ball, that motion that's compatible with the direction of your movement in the body to become effective. So that's really sort of the analogical side or the analysis that you have to put into applying a technique. So when something comes in your position, your movement really depends on what you're doing with that motion. So we have the lower hoop, we have the high position. When we turn over or we reverse the hand or reverse the ball, so that's all we're doing is just taking the same things that we've been programming into the body as a big circle, as a palm strikes face, to high pat the horse. So high pat the horse, palm strike face, they kind of go hand in hand. They support each other and it allows you to maneuver through the space depending on what you're applying. So in the beginning of the form, where we have the kicks, we have high pat the horse. So what is the difference between those circles? The circles are the same. It's just that it's adapting to the space, it's adapting to your rotation, it's adapting. So when we talk about spatial awareness, proprioception, referencing the body, all of those things become so highlighted when I bring it up as this concept, and you start to say, oh, I can see it now. That's what it means. So you have to take that idea and that concept and understand what space, as far as space and volume is, and how you move through that space. So, when we talk about space and geometry, if I'm here and I'm here, that's directly in front. So if I'm tracking my movement, I'm rolling forward like this, it's like that. If I take it off to the corner, take it back to this corner, the change of the movement really changes the direction of motion, because the body has trouble tracking all of that unless you can really dial that in from the frequency of practice, and that's really time sensitive, because when I move into the 45-degree corner, and that's why we reference the 45-degree corner, that's the real volume of your space. So if you can understand that concept, then dealing with the volume of space will really play into why the hands have to move like this and like this. Now, there was a question. Sometimes I see it like it's going forward. Well, it is going forward and backward depending on how your body's position and its torso is. If my body is flat like this, it's going from right to left. Well, if I go like this and it's going from right to left, if I turn it back to the front, it's going to look like it's going over the top and it's changing directions, because that's what's happening when I move through space. That circle is the same circle essentially, but the thing is I'm moving and changing the reference point of where my body is moving. And why is that important? Because adaptability in a technique really has to do with, when my hand goes here, how do I control, what's the control factor of that limb that you're trying to deal with? Because you really have to adapt based on that variable, that external unit that you're dealing with. So if I'm here and I take the hand this way, I lead it to here and I fold my elbow, I change in so many directions that you really can't track it completely without knowing the motion. So really, your hands are going through all these. It's really, if I had a laser tracking those movements, it would be all over the place in circles and arcs and and figure eights, because the locus of points that carries you through the dimensional change of those motion relative to your body becomes quite a complex thing. So how do you track all of that and control the natural body mechanics of those movements and have a natural strength, not manipulating your skeletal structure with a conflict in direction or movement because of tension in the body, tension in the joint? All of this stuff has to come into play because now your body has to become adaptable. It's moving in space. So it's not just your hands. It's not just your legs. It's not just your abs moving in a single direction. It's actually all of these things blending together to create one complete, really intelligent motion. So that's what you're actually learning. So the simple thing, palm strikes face, is in front of your face. High pat the horse, flip the hands, fold the elbows, center line, opening, dropping the hand. High pat the horse really brings you back to here. That's all you're doing. Palm strikes face is this. How you turn, how you maneuver, how you backtrack really becomes part of that circle. See, eventually, that's all your body is doing. But how do you train for that? What format do you use to do that? It's understanding the transition in the posture and how you take these postures and blend it together. It's just something that happens through just sort of a metamorphosis of you starting from square one and then building. It becomes like a butterfly. It just blossoms and it becomes something else. Okay, so that's really what we're doing with the form. The form is just a vehicle to practice movements. It's like a book of movement. Can you insightfully discover all these concepts inside the form is a whole level of understanding that you have to go through over time. It's like any of you that are very, expert in your field. How long did you train and go through what you've gone through to get to where you understand the level of what you're dealing with as a profession? It takes a long time. Everything is kind of on the surface until you start to make your breakthroughs, and then you become very astute, and then everything becomes very simple. So that's really what you can take away from this as high pat the horse. So remember, high pat the horse, palm in front of the face, or they sometimes call it palm strikes face. So when you go forward and back and forward, that's without moving at all. Once you turn, it changes the look of the movement and the dimension of why it looks like it's going forward and back. Now when I do this and I go forward and back, there's a relationship in how the hands and legs actually will start to move. So when you go from here to here to here, that really is tied to your lower back and your two shoulders. So between the lower back and two shoulders, you have your triangle. Okay. So in Yethimon, a lot of you have done this drill. It's the changing of the palms. If you do that drill, it's in Tai Chi, it's in Kung Fu, it's also in Bagua, Xingyi. All of the styles or systems, the internal systems, has this drilling movement. It's called changing palms or drilling. Right? So this drilling movement is what you need to practice with the hands and then the torso, and then the hands and torso will start to blend. And then when you tie it together with the legs, you start to recognize how the body has to build compatibility of movement directionally. I use that term a lot, but the thing is, movements that are compatible with direction. It just sounds great that it's a term, but what does it mean? It really depends on how dimensionally astute your body is and how dimensionally challenged your body is, whether it understands what that really means. And that varies with every individual based on that physical mind-body connection. And it varies so much that you can't really say, well, you're not doing 100% wrong, or that person is doing 100% wrong, because it varies so much, you really can't get into why that person can't do it, because they just haven't reached that stage. So that's where the idea of when we're practicing, you can't be so critical. I call that the correctness of the motion. It's not how wrong it is. It varies with the correctness based on the individual. I had a term for that. It kind of slipped my mind what I used to say, but it's degree of correction, really. So when you go through the movements, you have to let your body evolve, and it begins to build that understanding. So I think I ran out of time just working on palm strikes face, but the thing is, every one of these postures that you're learning inside the long form without going through the sequence is something that is a level of training that you have to kind of isolate it, dissect it, look at what the movements kind of are, and you'll begin to discover and become more insightful of what Tai Chi has to offer on that level. Okay, on that note, if you enjoyed this, give us a thumbs up, review it if you need to, and go to YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Like I said, all of this stuff is archived, and we have another probably 45 days of streaming, and then we're really working on the schedule of how we can open and bring back some of the students, whether it's smaller classes. Definitely, I've already marked out the 6-foot space, but they're talking now that we really don't have to be so concerned with what we touch, because the virus doesn't really transmit that way. It's more about the contact. So we'll talk, and we'll see you again.